Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 8 player game Challengers, designed by Johannes Krenner and Marko Slavacek, and published by Z-Man Games, who helped sponsor this video. To win the world's greatest Capture the Flag tournament, you're going to have to assemble the world's greatest team. But don't worry, you'll have plenty of candidates to choose from. Cowboys, sorcerers, ghosts, cooks. I'm pretty sure I even saw a giant rubber chicken in here. Recruit your dream team and then take on all challengers. But first, join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, you'll need to organize the cards, but don't worry, they're easy to distinguish. Start by finding the ones with either an A, B, or C in their bottom right-hand corners. Each of these will have an icon in these areas, and cards with matching icons are part of a set. The ones with this symbol are specifically known as the Basic City set, and you'll always use this set in any game of Challengers you play. You'll also find 6 additional sets, again, each with their own icons, and you pick any 5 of those to use when you play. If you're having trouble choosing for your first game, they recommend not using this outer space set. Then separate each of the sets you'll be using by their A, B, and C types, combining all of the A's together and all of the B's together and all of the C's so it looks like this when you're done. Now shuffle each stack into face-down decks and add them to the matching labeled card trays based on the lettered stickers that you'll need to apply to them when setting up the game for the very first time. Nearby, also create a supply of what are known as the fan tokens. Next, you'll need to determine which of these park mats you'll play with based on this table found in the rulebook. In this video, we'll assume we have 4 players, and that means we need the leaf and mushroom play mats. As you can see, each of these has a symbol in their corner here, so we can return these 2 back to the box. The double-sided cards with this design are known as the tournament plans, and you'll notice they list the potential number of players in your game along their right side. In this case, we have 4 players, so we'll look for all of the cards with a 4-player count highlighted in white, which would be these top 4, and we'll return the rest of them to the box. This tournament plan is especially unique since it highlights all possible player counts, which means it will always be used in every game. Now randomly give each player one of the tournament plan cards along with the deck of cards labeled with an S in the bottom right-hand corner and the icon that matches the one found in their plan's bottom right-hand corner. In this video, I'll be the diamond player, so I'd collect these cards. Before we continue, remember we set out our 2 park mats, the green one which shows leaves and the red one which shows mushrooms. 2 players will compete at each park, seated across from each other. And to determine who sits where, everyone checks the top row of their tournament plan. As the diamond player, my top row is green, but you'll also notice that my leaf has a dark green box behind it. This player's top row is also green, but their leaf has a lighter background. This means that as the diamond player, I'll sit on this side of the green park that shows a leaf with a dark green background, and my opponent will sit on the other side that shows a leaf with a lighter background. In the same way, the other 2 players have a light and dark mushroom on their card, which means they sit beside the related dark and lighter mushroom. And in the middle of each park, you now set the flag token that matches its color. Now find these trophy tokens and sort them by the numbers on the side that don't show a star. And then give each group a good mix and create a stack of trophies using one from each group, ordered so that the 7 is on the bottom all the way up to a 1 that will sit on top. Create one of these stacks for each park and place them in their central area. There are some rules changes if you have an odd number of players, and just a small adjustment if you have only 2 players, but we'll discuss all of that at the end of this video. Otherwise, that's the setup. In Challengers, players will recruit cards to their deck from the stacks of A, B, and C cards that we created earlier, and then compete in a match to capture the flag that sits between them and their opponent. End the match holding the flag, and you'll earn some points. Now, during a match, you'll compete against just one other player, but multiple matches happen at the same time if you have more than 2 players. For example, in this 4-player game, while I compete against my opponent at this park, the other 2 players at the same time are having their own match at this one. When both our matches are finished, some players change seats to ensure the next matches are against new opponents. After 7 rounds of matches like this, the 2 players with the most points will face off one last time to determine the winner. Each match is played the same general way, so let's begin by seeing how we complete the first one. And a match is divided into 2 phases, starting with the deck phase. Here, each player examines the row of their tournament plan that matches the current round. We're in round 1, so we look at this top row. The letters in the center tell us what decks we can pick from this round. In this case, deck A only. If we pretend for a moment that we were in round 3, we could choose to draw from either deck A or B, but never both. You must pick one or the other. We'll see some examples of some of the cards later, but for now, just know that cards increase in power as you go from deck A to C. Whenever you pick a deck, you'll always draw a total of 5 cards. So for round 1, we must take 5 from deck A. And while you can examine the cards you've drawn, keep them hidden from the other players. Although you always draw 5 cards from the deck you've chosen, you only get to keep a number of them equal to the number of cards showing with the lettered icon. In this case, the symbol shows 2 cards, so we can only keep 2 of the 5 that we draw. The other 3 we'll have to discard. Again, jumping ahead to round 3, you can see that if you choose to take from deck A, you'll draw 5 and keep 2. But if you choose deck B, you still draw 5 cards as usual, but only keep 1. Since it is round 1, I'll be drawing 5 cards from deck A. And we'll see later why you might pick certain cards over others, but for now, I'll pick these 2, and the 3 that I'm discarding, I set into the compartment for them here at the back of that matching lettered deck. Although it's unlikely to happen, if this back compartment ever gets too full, just shuffle the cards there and then set them underneath of the deck that you have in that tray. During each deck phase, you may discard all of the cards you drew a single time and then redraw that many again. So let's just do my deck phase over to show you how this might work. Again, I start by drawing 5 cards, in this case from stack A. Now, if I want, I could decide to discard all of these cards and then draw 5 new ones. Now, you can only do this once per phase, so now I have to pick my 2 cards from these new options. I can't redraw again. However, if you're keeping 2 cards, you can discard before or after your first pick. For example, let's just, again, say I'm starting over. I would first draw 5 cards, and let's say I decide to keep, well, maybe just this one. I could now discard the other 4 and then draw 4 more, and from these, pick my last card. And then I would get rid of the rest. Now remember, in addition to the cards that you gained during the deck phase, you already had cards which were given out during the setup, and the new cards you gain will be added to these. You can always examine the cards you already have during the deck phase. Just be careful not to mix these cards together in with the ones you're choosing from until after you've chosen your new cards. Once you have, these are all combined into a single deck. Now at this point, you can go through your entire deck and remove any amount of cards from it. This can be useful, especially later, because as the game goes on and you get better and better cards, some of your earlier cards become less useful, and this is your chance to remove those from your deck if you want. Any cards you choose to remove are put in their related discard piles, or if you're getting rid of starter cards, which have an S in the corner, just return those to the box. And that's the deck phase. Just know, players will go at their own pace, drawing and discarding cards as they're ready to. Only advance to the match phase, which is next, once everyone is ready. And we'll assume they now are. During this match phase, you'll now play a game of capture the flag against your opponent, and you do this independently of the other players. In other words, we'll be taking our turns over here as we like, and at the same time, the players at this park will be taking their turns, but again at their own pace. Before anyone begins, though, everyone collects their own cards together, shuffling them into a single face-down deck in front of themselves. And you are not allowed to examine the cards in your deck or change their order from this point on unless the game instructs you to. Now, for the very first match, determine which player takes the first turn at each park by flipping the flag token. And this has a white and a black side. And we'll assume that my opponent gets to go first. The person who is going is said to be on the attack. Since the park will fit on screen a little easier if I rotate it this way, that's what I've done. And I have my opponent sitting here, and I'm over here. When attacking, you flip one card at a time from your deck face up onto your side of the park mat until the total value in the top corner of those cards is equal to or higher than any face up on your opponent's side. This value is known as the card's power. Well, I have none face up yet, so that means the very first card they flipped beats my current total value, which is 0. As soon as a player has flipped enough cards to beat their opponent, they must stop and give the flag to the card they last played, setting it on top like this. Now this card is said to be in flag possession. Now it's my turn, and since I'm not in possession, that means I'm now on the attack. So again, one at a time, I'll flip cards until my total beats my opponent's total. Well, I flipped a 1, and that doesn't beat the 4 we see here, so I'll flip again, arranging my cards so their values can all be easily seen. This time, I've revealed a 2, bringing my total to 3. That's still not enough, so I'll have to flip again, but first, I need to resolve this card's effect. Any card you flip with an effect here must be resolved as much as you're able. In this case, we're told to draw the top 2 cards of our deck. We examine them and then return one of them to the bottom of our deck and the other goes on top. This can help me set up my deck for future wins since I'll know more about its order. With the effect resolved, I need to continue flipping cards since I haven't beat the total showing on the card that's in flag possession. Now look at this, I flipped another 1, but this brings me to a total of 4, and as soon as your total equals or exceeds the total showing on your opponent's card in flag possession, you must stop, because this means you've gained possession. I now take the flag and add it to the last card I played, sliding all the other cards underneath of it. Now this is very important, because their values underneath no longer count. They help me capture the flag, but only this card is in possession of the flag. Not only that, but once possession has been taken over, the other player must send each card they have in this area of their park to their bench, which are the 6 spaces on this side. Which space a card goes into doesn't matter, but maybe I'll just set their champion here. Now, since my opponent is no longer in possession, they go on the attack and they'll flip a card. Now, they're showing a 2. And this certainly beats my card because remember, the top value is the only one that counts, and 2 exceeds my 1. This player is now in flag possession, so they take the flag, sending all of these cards to my bench. Now, each card must go into its own space unless it's an exact copy of another card, in which case they're stacked on top of each other. So these 2 cards, which are both newcomers, would go together. But you have to be very careful about this because let's just say, for the sake of example, that this card here gets sent to my bench later. Even though it's also a 2, like this card, it can't go on top of this one since they're not an exact match. This is called the reporter and this is called talent, so it would have to go in its own slot. And this matters because turns will go back and forth like this until one of 2 possible things occur to end the match. If you're on the attack, but run out of cards in your deck before you create a total power that equals or exceeds the power of your opponent's flag carrier, you lose. You also lose the match if you ever need to send players to the bench and there's no available space to send them to. Let's just pretend it was later in the game and I also had these cards in my bench as well. And let's also say that I was in flag possession. If my opponent then flipped this card over when they were on the attack, they would beat this value and gain possession. And now this card needs to go to my bench, but there's no place for it, so this would cause me to lose the match. The player who wins the match collects the trophy of the current round, setting it in front of themselves. A player can always examine the other side of their own trophies, which will show you how many fans you've earned, but keep this a secret from the other players. Trophies in later rounds will be worth even more fans, as you'll see when you play. At the end of a match, once a winner has gained their trophy, those players each collect their own cards together that originally made up their deck, so they take them back from the park, from the bench, and wherever else they may be. You'll now wait until the other players are finished their matches, and then it's time for the next round. Here, each player will look at their tournament plan's next row, number 2 in this case, to see which park they should be competing in, and then they'll go sit on the appropriate side. For example, this is my plan, so it means I'll be going to the red park seated on the dark mushroom side, which also means I'll be facing off against the player who holds this tournament plan, which also seats them at the red park. Once again, each player performs their deck phase following the information on the current row of their tournament plan, where they'll draw from the related deck and keep the indicated number of cards. And then after, also as before, they can choose to remove any number of cards from their deck. When the match phase begins, instead of flipping the flag token to see who goes first like we did at the beginning of the game, the player who is currently holding the highest numbered trophy at that park will go first instead. If there's a tie, then in that case, you will just flip the flag token. And with that, you now know how to play the rounds of the game. But what will make each game unique is the combination of characters you recruit into your decks and their various effects. Now, we're not going to go over each effect in this video, as how they work is described on the cards themselves, but we will go over a few of them so I can teach you the key terms you'll need to understand. Some cards have bolded keywords, which we'll discuss shortly, but a card that doesn't is immediately resolved as much as possible after it's revealed. For example, this stable boy gets +1 power for each card with a base power of 3 that's on your bench. So if they were flipped in a situation like this, the stable boy's total power would be its 2, plus 1 from here and another from here, for a total power of 4. And this effect stays active while I'm on the attack, even if I reveal another card on top of it. However, once I get possession, this card will disappear behind the other one as usual, and now its power is no longer counted. An effect with a bolded keyword tells you when its effect applies. For example, this gangster only gets +2 power when it's attacking. So if I reveal it when I'm on the attack, it has a total power of 4. And let's say this puts it in possession of the flag. Now it's no longer on the attack, so its power is only 2. On the other hand, this skeleton doesn't gain any bonus when it's attacking, but if it's in flag possession, it gains +1 to its power. The clairvoyant has a flag loss effect, which triggers as soon as this character loses possession of the flag. In this case, you get to look through your deck and choose any card to put on top of it. But you must keep all the rest in the same order they were in. If an effect says it resolves from the bench, it only resolves while it's in one of those bench spaces. But keep in mind, multiple copies of the same card each provide their bonus. So we get the effect twice in this case. A when picked effect is resolved as soon as you decide to keep that card during your deck phase. Just reveal it to your opponent and resolve its effect. In this case, we're told to take 1 fan. Anytime you're told to gain fans, take the related amount from the supply and just keep them near you. And those are all of the bolded keywords, but I shall also show you this card, which in its effect says that you can put up to 2 cards from your bench onto your exhaust pile. This just means you add them to a face-up exhaust pile near your deck. But keep in mind, you don't automatically shuffle your exhaust pile into your deck when your deck becomes empty. Cards can only go back into your deck if an effect tells you to send them there. I'll also point out that some cards indicate how many copies of them exist in the game. For example, there are 3 ponies and 8 skeletons. If a card doesn't include a printed indication of how many copies it has, it means there are 4 copies of it. With that, you now know enough rules to be able to interpret any effects you come across when playing. And rounds of matches will continue until players have completed the 7th one, which is easy to identify because that's when you'll be handing out the trophies that have a 7 marked on them. At that point, each person flips over their collected trophies and totals the fans showing on those and any tokens they've collected. You now determine who has the most and second most total fans. If there's a tie between players for number of fans, the tied player with the most trophies wins. If there's still a tie, the tied player with the trophy showing the highest round number wins. Either way, the players with the most and second most fans will now compete in one final match to determine the ultimate winner. Now in this final match, they don't draw any new cards, but may still remove any number of cards from their deck before starting. The winner of this final match is then declared the winner of Challengers. If you have a 2-player game, you don't play a final match. Instead, the person with the most fans after 7 rounds wins. Also in a 2-player game, you immediately reveal trophies as you gain them, so players can see the total scores round after round. And if a player ever has at least 11 more fans than their opponent does at the end of a match phase, that player immediately wins. If you're playing with an odd number of players, each round, one of the players will face the robot, which is run using this deck of gray starting cards, which are shuffled into its own face-down deck. And if players agree, it's recommended to assign the robot this tournament plan card. When a player is facing the robot, they just flip the cards from the top of this deck until the robot gains possession, and then they start flipping cards from their deck until they gain possession, then they'll flip cards from this deck back and forth until one of them wins. The robot will not change its deck during the deck phase unless you want to increase the difficulty when facing the robot, allowing you to add in cards from this deck of gray R cards, which is explained here in the rules. There's also a solo mode, which uses these cards and these rules, but all of these I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Challengers. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.